Do I know you from somewhere? The moment the beautiful CEO, Patricia Brown, saw my face during a meeting with my boss, Mila Johnson, a glimmer of recognition seemed to flash across her eyes. Mila, standing before me with a forced grin, dismissively labeled me as just an incompetent rookie in a mocking tone. After the meeting concluded, while Mila lavished Patricia with praise, I quietly began tidying up. "I've been searching for you," Patricia said, ignoring Mila's presence. She approached me and grasped my hand. "Madam CEO, what do you mean you were seeking out this supposedly incompetent individual?" Mila was visibly stunned, while Patricia gazed at me with tears brimming in her eyes. Little did we know, this moment would drastically alter the fate of Mila, who had always looked down on others. "My name is Edward. I work at Williams Trading Company, and I'm 53 years old. Although I joined this company just 2 years ago, I've had diverse professional experiences before. In a word, my life has been tumultuous. My father was a capable businessman who traveled the globe. My mother and I lived in various countries due to my father's work. Thanks to this, I've become fluent in around 5 languages, starting with English. In my teenage years, my mother grew weary of the constant travel and decided to part ways with my father. My father, who had independently mastered English after the war, firmly believed that with diligence and resolve, anything was possible. This led him to wonder why my mother, who had become more reclusive and homebound, did not socialize more. He even asked me directly, "Why doesn't your mom go out and meet people?" with genuine perplexity. Whether it was due to my inheriting my father's traits or my ability to adapt easily to new environments, I had no complaints about living with him. However, when I compared his seemingly content solitude to my mother's daily tears, I decided to return to the U.S. with her. My father appeared slightly saddened by this, but promptly returned to his work. It was a time of economic prosperity, and Japanese businessmen were ubiquitous. Even without much effort, work was comfortable and incredibly exciting for my father. And so, I departed for the U.S. with my mother. My father provided substantial alimony and child support, ensuring there would be no concerns regarding my educational expenses. However, my uncle, who had invested in real estate, persuaded my mother to join him in this venture. And that's when our troubles began. At first, the investments were profitable, and my family enjoyed a prosperous period. But when I was preparing for college entrance exams, the economic bubble burst. My uncle, being an inexperienced investor, quickly found himself in insurmountable debt. He had been entrusted with my college funds, leaving us destitute and forcing us out of our home. I managed to graduate high school, but struggled to find a suitable job, so I resorted to taking on part-time work. My mother, once again, retreated into seclusion and eventually became bedridden. She was severely depressed, although mental health issues were not widely recognized at the time. She lost her appetite, grew thin, and ultimately succumbed to a common cold. This occurred shortly after my 20th birthday. My uncle disappeared, and his family severed all ties with us. I was left alone, but my father's resilience helped me avoid succumbing to excessive pessimism. Fortunately, I was able to forego inheriting my mother's debts by waiving the inheritance. Here is a paraphrased version of the given text. I've had a diverse work history, dabbling in various industries like food service, construction, and manufacturing. I even taught myself programming and became a software engineer, but none of these jobs ever truly resonated with me or felt like a long-term fit. As I approached my 50th birthday, I knew it was time to make a change. That's when a friend introduced me to Williams Trading Company, a mid-sized yet stable organization where the work aligns well with my skills and interests. The employees have been welcoming, and despite being new to sales, they've taken me under their wing and shared their knowledge. There is, however, one aspect that poses a challenge. My boss, Mila Johnson, the sales department manager. Her brash tone often catches me off guard, as I hear her sharp voice summon me to her desk. "Yes," I reply hurriedly, making my way to her. Mila's voice booms. You're late. I always say, when I call, you come within 3 seconds. As expected, an old beginner has sluggish reactions. Impatiently tapping her desk, Mela glares in my direction. I'm very sorry, I say, bowing deeply. I knew from experience that without this gesture, she would yell at me even more. Okay, fine, just be more careful next time. Now, have you prepared the materials for the meeting next week? What? I was told the deadline was the day after tomorrow, wasn't it? Who told you that? She snaps. You did, Miss Johnson. I start, but before I can finish, a thick stack of papers is slammed onto the desk. Who said that? I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood, she retorts. Isn't that right? Be grateful I corrected your misunderstanding. Are your old ears failing you? Hey, why are you just standing there? Hurry up and get the materials ready. Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I respond politely and turn to go back to my desk. Again, I think to myself, since the day I was assigned here, Mela has singled me out, finding faults and going back on her words just to attack me. Why is this happening? Is it because I'm a 50-year-old beginner? My coworker next to me gave me a compassionate expression. Our gazes locked, and we exchanged wry grins, yet we remained silent. Once, when a colleague attempted to assist me by offering extra resources, Mela witnessed it and harshly reprimanded me. Naturally, I was the one who faced the consequences. Apparently, I was not supposed to bother my busy colleagues. Since then, everyone realized that showing kindness towards me in Mila's presence would lead to even worse treatment, so they refrained from speaking up openly. However, they would discreetly lend me a hand when Mila was not around. That's why I can't quit, I thought to myself. Besides, I don't dislike the sales work. I'm truly my father's son, I mused, feeling somewhat amused. Still, what should I do about Mela's attitude? As I hastily prepared the materials, I thought, I suppose I'll have to work at least 2 days ahead of any deadline, not trusting the given dates. I'll strive to stay on top of my tasks. Edward, what about those materials? Here it is, Edward, the estimate for the upcoming project. It's all done. I've also secured approval from the manufacturing division. My strategy was working, and even Mela couldn't find fault with it. My coworkers were impressed, saying, Edward, you're exceptional. I thought I could finally unwind, but I soon realized how mistaken that assumption was. At first, Mela seemed taken aback and would respond with phrases like, oh, okay, or well, that's fine. However, she quickly started becoming irritated. It seemed that not being able to vent her frustrations on me was only increasing her stress. Edward. Her voice was already laced with rage when she called out to me. Yes, what is the matter? You know, she'd had summoned me, but she didn't seem to have any criticism to voice. I mentally reviewed my tasks, trying to identify anything she could potentially fault. Nothing. I was safe. I told myself not to cower in front of Mela and stood before her with a serious expression. Mela glared at me, her body trembling with anger. She was probably searching for a reason to blame me. After staring at me for a while, her face suddenly brightened, as if she had just thought of something. Edward, that plant over there is wilting. Have you been watering it? You haven't, have you? This is negligence. The supervisor, Miss Johnson, suddenly shifted the blame onto me, even though the issue had nothing to do with my work duties. I gently explained, Miss Johnson, that plant belongs to you, and I was instructed not to touch it. However, my response only fueled her outrage. She scolded me, asserting that as the newest team member, I should be responsible for the plant's care, implying that a younger manager's plant should not be allowed to die. As she slammed the documents on the desk, her anger seemed more intense than usual, perhaps because she had not found a reason to express it lately. Breathing heavily, Mela concluded with an oddly satisfied expression. Regardless, you may be experienced, but you're new to this department. You need to be attentive to everything and not annoy me." I understood her fervent request. Regardless of my efforts or lack thereof, it made no difference to Mila. She was merely venting her own anxieties upon me. Unbelievable. At this rate, she'll find fault even with the spotless windows. I sighed as I returned to my desk, noticing my coworkers observing us with tense expressions. Even the kindest individuals must suspect a reason behind Miss Johnson's targeted treatment of me. I felt utterly dejected, yet deep within, my resolve began to grow. Very well, if that's how it must be, I'll prove my worth through my work. I started working even more diligently than before. I studied our products thoroughly, visited the factory, and gathered data about their strengths. I incorporated this knowledge into my presentations and pitched to clients. The outcomes were positive, and I secured several contracts. Excellent. If I keep demonstrating my capabilities, even Miss Johnson will have to acknowledge me. And age is irrelevant. So I continued achieving results. Of course, as Mila instructed, I also tended to the plants. It seemed that Mila's attitude towards me was gradually improving. Johnson couldn't criticize the situation. Additionally, her annoyed demeanor had softened recently. At last, my hard work is yielding results, I began to think. However, Mila still had no plans to welcome me as a co-worker. I understood this just a fortnight later. "Edward, come over here for a bit," Mila addressed me, surprisingly upbeat. "Of course, what's the matter?" I promptly made my way to her desk. The company we're set to sign a new deal with is highly significant. I'm the one assigned to go, but Edward, you'll be joining me. I couldn't believe it when she asked me to accompany her to meet such an important client. "Yes, you've been doing well with some smaller deals recently. This is a great chance for you to learn from a big project. I'll be the main contact, so you can just observe and learn from me," Mila said, surprisingly making a lot of sense. I was too stunned to respond at first. "What? Do you have a problem?" She glared at me, some things never changing. "I'm honored. Thank you for the opportunity," I managed to say. "My pleasure," Mila replied, her grin a bit unsettling. But I was too excited about the new project to worry about it. Mila introduced herself with practiced ease. "Nice to meet you. I'm Mila Johnson, sales manager at Williams Trading," handing her card to the CEO, Patricia Brown, of Castle Mountain. "Thank you. And who is this?" Patricia said, looking at me. I was overwhelmed by her stunning beauty as we met for the first time. I'm Edward," I stammered, quickly handing over my own business card. Here's a paraphrased version of the given text. As I presented my company's offerings, Patricia examined my ID card, then peered curiously at my face. "Forgive me, but have we crossed paths before?" she murmured, as if trying to recall a past encounter. Before I could respond, Mila interjected dismissively, "He's just a rookie, nothing more." Then, addressing Patricia directly, she said in a mocking tone, "Miss Brown, we're truly grateful that you've chosen to work with our company once again." I knew that Patricia had founded Castle Mountain, a rapidly growing business specializing in beauty products for women. Their interest in the items handled by Williams Trading had led to this potential partnership. "Not at all, the pleasure is ours," Patricia replied warmly. "It's an honor to have our sales manager herself, accompanied by an experienced staff member, visit us today. I'm confident you'll be able to address any questions or requests we may have." Compared to the poised and elegant Patricia, the tall and sharp-featured Mila struck me as undeniably beautiful, but in a more abrasive manner. I had witnessed Mila pound on her desk, shouting profanities while wielding thick documents, a far cry from Patricia's refined demeanor. "All right then, Edward, go ahead and explain," Mila said casually, catching me off guard. "Huh. Isn't it your job to handle the main negotiations, Miss Johnson?" I couldn't help but question her. I was sure she had asked me to simply observe and learn. What are you talking about? You insisted on doing it, so I entrusted it to you. Surely you came prepared, didn't you? She looked at me with a puzzled and disbelieving expression. Ah, I see now. I was set up. In that moment, the realization hit me. Instead of tormenting me at the office, she had now chosen to humiliate me in front of a client, risking the deal. What was she thinking? Her eyes gleamed with a mischievous intent. Seeing that, I understood why she had been so quiet lately. She was planning this trap. The glint in her eyes as she watched my bewildered face showed her delight. But I won't succumb to her scheme. I steeled my nerves. Understood, Miss Brown. Please take a look at these documents, I said, taking out the contract materials from my briefcase and handing them to Patricia. Then I began my explanation. Hold on a minute, Miss Johnson. Handing the paperwork to Mila, I saw her eyes widen in surprise. Undeterred, I pressed on with my detailed account. Patricia observed quietly, allowing me to complete my explanation without interruption. Once finished, I inquired, Patricia, do you have any queries? Certainly, your presentation was clear. I'll compile my questions and send them to you via email. Please address those when you can. We firmly shook hands, signaling the successful conclusion of our discussion. Mela, her expression one of bewilderment, asked, Does this mean? The contract will proceed as planned, with Edward leading the way. I heard Mila grinding her teeth beside me, but I immediately accepted the role without hesitation. Mela could no longer contain her voice. What? Edward, you? However, Patricia's calm voice cut through the tension. By the way, both Mela and I turned to Patricia, who revealed, I've been looking for you, brother. I couldn't help but cry out in surprise. What? Brother? Mila seemed equally shocked. Patricia explained, Yes, brother. I'm your half-sister, Patricia Brown. My father, James Smith, often spoke of his son, Edward, whom he assumed had taken his mother's maiden name, Edward. She approached me with a smile, noting the resemblance in our demeanor and expressions during business meetings. I was taken aback by Patricia's revelation, but her account sounded credible. After all, she had no reason to be dishonest with me as we worked to finalize a business agreement. Her words evoked vivid recollections of my father, stirring emotions within me. I'm surprised, yet I'm grateful for this information. I've been on my own since my mother's passing. Unfortunately, I lost contact with my father, and he passed away 3 years ago. Patricia nodded solemnly. Yes, your father was a remarkable individual, and I cherished him. He was always concerned about your well-being. After the economic downturn, he came to the United States once in search of you, but your mother's family had dispersed, and he couldn't locate you. I felt a sense of joy upon realizing that my father had indeed made efforts to find me, even though he had seemingly forgotten about me. As Patricia and I continued our conversation, Mila, who had been overlooked, interjected with an irritated tone, requesting that I sign the contract. Without hesitation, I agreed, and Patricia swiftly signed the documents, attempting to hand them to me. However, Mila swiftly snatched the papers away, declaring that it was time for us to leave. Ignoring the puzzled expressions of Patricia and myself, Mila hurriedly departed, with me following behind. As we returned to the office, Mila suddenly turned to face me, her expression resembling a terrifying demonic mask. In a strained, low voice, she expressed her desire to have a serious discussion, questioning why the materials I had prepared for Castle Mountain differed from the ones she had instructed me to create, as they contained more detailed information than she had requested. When I received the hasty note from you, Mela, instructing me to create materials based on its contents, I did so. However, I felt the resulting materials might not adequately convey our products to the client. So, I put together additional information I believed the client would find useful and prepared my own set of materials, keeping them in my bag as a supplement in case your explanation fell short. Since you told me to explain, but didn't provide the materials you intended to use, I had no choice but to rely on my own, I explained. Are you saying this is my fault? Mela exclaimed, clearly displeased with my response. Ultimately, the client understood the materials well, so it's not a problem, is it? Yes, and this Patricia Brown business, is she your sister? Long lost. It was quite the emotional display. There seems to be quite an age gap between you two. Your father must have been quite the active older man. How distasteful. Mila's mocking words struck a nerve. I could accept her comments about me, but I wouldn't tolerate her speaking ill of my parents. Miss Johnson, that remark was inappropriate and a violation of company compliance. Excuse me, are you upset? Mela asked, pushing my shoulder firmly. The force caused me to stumble a bit. Stumbling from a woman's push. You must be getting old, she scoffed. Your arrogant colleague said you'd be the lead, but you should decline. Tell her I should be the one in charge instead. My stumbling has nothing to do with my role at Castle Mountain. I have no plans to step down from the position I was assigned, I insisted. Our heated exchange drew the attention of the lobby's occupants, but we were too engrossed in the argument to notice. Suddenly, a booming voice interrupted us. Enough. Both of you, stop this right now. It was John Williams, the president of Williams Trading, standing with a stern expression. Mr. President, Mila gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Look around. Everyone heard your dispute. Now, come to my office. We'll continue this there, he commanded with undeniable authority, and Mila and I followed. Yes, I apologize, I said sincerely. Good. And you, Miss Johnson? Reluctantly, Mila and I followed the supervisor to the president's office, a place we seldom visited. Justify your actions, Mr. Williams commanded as soon as we stepped inside. Eager to understand Mila's perspective, I chose to remain silent, but I instantly regretted my decision, for her explanation was nothing but a flagrant falsehood. She accused me of neglecting my responsibilities and mistreating my junior coworkers, claiming she had repeatedly tried to steer me in the right direction. But I had failed to make any progress, so she had brought me to the Castle Mountain meeting to demonstrate proper job performance. Instead, I disregarded my responsibilities and chatted with a relative, then secured the position through my personal connections. According to her, I should have declined the offer, but I shamelessly accepted it, displaying a complete lack of professionalism. She argued that someone as old and dishonorable as me deserves termination, and should be replaced with younger, more compliant employees. That's her account. Do you have any counterarguments, Edward? Mr. Williams looked at me, his eyes cold as he glanced at Mila, who was panting after her tirade. Yes, I have numerous counterarguments, I said, and then I systematically refuted Mila's accusations. I explained that I never neglected my duties or dominated my colleagues. I added that my coworkers could verify this. I mentioned that Mila's constant harassment and tantrums had been unbearable, and that I kept records and occasionally recorded her behavior on my phone. I provided that as evidence later. Regarding today's meeting, Miss Johnson only instructed me to observe and learn, but suddenly, without giving me any materials, she told me to present to the client. It was clearly an attempt to humiliate me. The client chose me over Miss Johnson for the crucial deal because they recognized my ability to keep business and personal matters separate. When Miss Johnson suggested I prioritized personal affairs, I explained that while I had recently discovered the CEO of Castle Mountain as my half-sibling, this was only discussed after the business was completed, and the client understood the distinction. I disclosed everything to the president, despite Mila's attempts to interrupt. Though the president seemed troubled by the revelation, he left the room to ponder it. Afterward, Mila warned me that I had overshared, reminding me to be discreet, mindful of the surveillance cameras in the office. I apologize for the delay, said Mr. Williams after a moment, his expression now visibly frustrated. I just spoke with Miss Brown from Castle Mountain. Her account aligns exactly with what Mr. Edward reported. That's because she's his sister. She's obviously trying to cover for him. Mela turned pale and nearly shouted. I simply asked her about the meeting, without sharing your version or Mr. Edward's. So, Patricia had indeed told the truth. Of course she had. Even if she weren't his sister, she wouldn't lie to protect Mila. What made her think she could get away with this? Miss Johnson, you've made a serious mistake. You attempted to sabotage an important meeting by humiliating Mr. Edward in front of a client. What would you have done if we lost the contract? Blame him and hope it wouldn't be discovered? Furthermore, your daily conduct is a major concern. We will investigate this matter. Until your punishment is determined, you are to stay home. This is unjust. You're going to keep this useless old man who bounces from job to job and get rid of me, someone valuable. What are you talking about? Mr. Edward is not useless. The individual we're discussing has demonstrated remarkable versatility, excelling in diverse fields. It's an honor to have them on our team, and their achievements in sales are noteworthy. They possess a multifaceted talent, not a lack of focus. Mila's eyes widened as she listened to Mr. Williams's commendation. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I scratched my head. I'm flattered to be described as versatile, but I simply pursued my passions and explored different roles. Nonetheless, I've always given my utmost in every position. This dedicated approach has undoubtedly shaped their impressive career trajectory. I once had the opportunity to speak with the CEO of the ad company they previously worked for. They were amazed that the individual had created a system that is still in use and making a significant impact, given that they were self-taught in that domain. Absolutely, I made it so that anyone could use it, not just me. This way, everyone can grasp the system easily. Ms. Johnson, you pride yourself on your talents, but what if you were suddenly gone? Mila was taken aback by the sudden question, but responded defiantly. Of course, everyone would be in trouble because no one can replace me. That's the problem. I believe it's crucial to ensure everything runs smoothly even if I'm not around tomorrow. This benefits my colleagues, our clients, and the company as a whole. Thinking that no one can replace you is merely self-satisfaction. Self-satisfaction. Mila was about to raise her voice again, but she noticed Mr. Williams's sharp gaze and fell silent. Yes, until you understand that, you won't change, I said, and she looked down, frustrated. That's right. I also need to ensure my absence wouldn't disrupt the company. Now I understand why none of your previous employers had anything bad to say about you, Mr. Williams murmured thoughtfully. Despite being a manager, you only think of yourself. It's truly disappointing, and I share some blame for not seeing this earlier, he added with a wry smile. As Mr. You seem to lack the skills needed to lead effectively. It appears you're unable to see the potential in your team members. Mila was overwhelmed and broke down at her desk, weeping. Tears won't solve this. Take the rest of the day off and don't return until you receive further instructions. Mila was still required to leave. Reluctantly, she stood up and departed, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a deflated one. Well, Edward, it's been quite an eventful day for you. Yes, I'm grateful you didn't just take Miss Johnson's words at face value and also heard my side of the story. So, do I have your approval to take on the role of president? Absolutely. We shook hands firmly, sealing the agreement. I hope you remain with our company for a long time. I find my work here very fulfilling, and I hope to stay as long as possible. That's wonderful to hear. I look forward to our continued collaboration. A thorough investigation into Mila's conduct was carried out, exposing her mistreatment of me and similar attitudes towards other mid-career employees. It became evident that she harbored a strong aversion towards individuals with diverse work histories. Ultimately, due to her compliance breaches and actions at Castle Mountain, that could have severely jeopardized the company, Mela was dismissed. Now, with a long and challenging path ahead of her, she would have to do the very thing she despised: seek a new job. I wondered if that hysterical and arrogant Mela could adapt to a new work environment. I heard through the grapevine that she found a new job, but soon encountered troubles and resigned. She repeated this pattern, causing issues and leaving each new position. Eventually, she could not secure full-time employment and had to settle for part-time roles. A colleague informed me that they witnessed her working and overheard younger coworkers making comments like, "That old woman is useless," but they could not bring themselves to greet her. "Brother, over here. This way." Since then, Patricia and I have maintained a connection outside of the workplace. She has become the family I had been missing for a long time. Today, she brought me to visit our father's grave. It's been a long time, nearly 3 decades, since that fateful day. As I stand before this modest grave, I join my hands in a respectful gesture, conveying my heartfelt greetings to the one who rests beneath. Eventually, I followed in your footsteps and became a salesman. While I may not be exploring the globe, I find fulfillment in my work. I'm doing all right, so you needn't fret. And I'm grateful that you introduced me to Patricia. As I concluded my prayer and rose to my feet, Patricia studied my expression. "What were you discussing?" "It's a private matter. A talk between us fellows." Sharing a laugh, we strode into the sunlight, our gaze fixed ahead.